This man was tormented by demons day in and day out for so long that it had become normal. Normal for him, normal for his community, normal and a nightmare. Oh, that's Legion. We can imagine the community saying, that's just what he does. Oh, that's just Legion. What else are we supposed to do with him? But Jesus doesn't accept that. Jesus does something that is actually normal when you meet a person for a first time. Jesus asks the man his name. And the man responds, "My name is Legion." Now you should know, because there are a lot of names in the Bible that aren't commonly used today, that Legion is not actually a name. And it wasn't a name 2,000 years ago either. A legion was a battalion of Roman soldiers, 3,000 to 5,000 strong. And since we're talking about names, you should also know that the name of the region that our scripture says was by the sea wasn't actually the name of a place by the sea at the time. Gerasa, the name of the place we heard in our text this morning, was the name of a village located far from the sea, but known for being leveled by the Romans during the 1st century after a Jewish uprising. So Legion, not a name. Gerasa, a name imported from somewhere else into this story. All of a sudden, it would seem as though there's more than first meets the eye when we hear this story of place and name. And since we're talking about the Roman military, we can't leave out the wild pig. Appearing in our story as the herd of swine in which the demons entered when they left the man, the wild pig was a symbol of the Roman military in Judea. The Romans used different flags in different places and for different legions. And in Judea, the pig was the common flag that was flown with the Roman military. So to the first hearers and tellers of this story, it was a symbol of the violence and oppression of empire. This text is about so much more than one person being healed from demons. Empire has so colonized his being that he has become known not for his own identity, not as the son of so-and-so, as we so often hear in the scriptures, but as the one whose violence is tormenting him. The man says, "My name is Legion." And as I hear him speak, I wonder, can we hear an immigrant reciting their A number to an ICE officer? Can we hear an incarcerated person giving their DOC, their Department of Corrections, ID number? Can we hear a trans person forced to answer to a dead name in the DMV? Because Legion is not a name, it is a system. It is empire. It is every structure that reduces someone's life to a label, a threat, a name on a file. And Jesus hears it too. Jesus hears it not as an identity, as so many others have accepted, but as a moral and spiritual injury, a possession. He says, "This isn't who you are." And for the first time in who knows how long, this man is known not by his past or his pain, not by his occupation. He is just himself. You would think everyone would celebrate, wouldn't you? That the whole town would get together and throw a party because, wow, what a transformation. But they don't. Did you catch that? When the man is possessed by demons, normal. Chaining him with the dead folks in the graveyard, normal. His separation and stigmatization, normal. But when he is healed, they are terrified. Because sometimes we get so used to someone suffering that we don't know what to do with their freedom. Sometimes we build whole systems around keeping people in chains because if they get free, it might mean that we have to change something too. Sometimes we can't imagine God's kingdom anymore because we are so overwhelmed, so inundated, so used to the violence that it has become normal. But people of God, our faith invites us into something different. Our faith invites us to stay connected to the liberator, healing ways of God, who hears us parrot the lines of empire and knows that it isn't the truth of who we are. And that brings us to Marcia. You may have heard her name before, Marcia P. Johnson. Black trans woman, drag performer, activist, organizer, and for many, the spiritual mother of the queer liberation movement. You may have heard that she was there at the Stonewall Uprising, a response to the normalized violence of police brutality and one too many raids on a gay bar. You may have heard about her joy and her courage, and I hope you've heard about her fierce care for her community, the nonprofits that she started supporting trans youth in finding their feet and meeting their basic needs. But you, like me, may not have realized that she was a person of deep faith. Did y'all know this? I didn't know this. I'm grateful to Reverend Stevie Hamill, who shared more about her story at the Trans Non-Binary Youth Retreat that our conference put on. Jesus is the only man I can really trust, Marcia said once. He's like a spirit that follows me around. He helps me out in my hours of need and listens to all my problems and never laughs at me. He takes me seriously. Just like Jesus did with the man called Legion. He listened, he didn't laugh, he took him seriously, he gave him back his name. Marcia Johnson, too, was always fighting for people to get their names back. She believed that queer and trans youth, especially trans youth of color, deserved more than survival. They deserved home and safety and community and joy, and she knew that freedom, true freedom, always costs something. Marcia was raised in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. She tells a story of leaving home at 16, being afraid of being homeless and yet wanting to be able to live as fully herself. She spoke to it in her last interview where she said, "I got the Lord on my side, and I took him to my heart with me, and I came to the city for better or worse. And he said, you might wind up with nothing. Because, me and Jesus is always talking. And I said, honey, I don't care if I never have nothing until the day I die. All I want is my freedom. All I want is my freedom." Over the years, she would make her faith her own, attending churches of many different denominations and building a spirituality that would sustain her and a movement who would follow her. I wonder how many of us are here because we are looking for something that will sustain us. Something that will take that tender part of all of us that knows that none of this is okay and will remind us that that tender place is our source of strength. Something to rely on, something to steady us, something to inspire us. Because then and now, empire seeks to colonize the bodies of those who are furthest to the margins and implicates all of us in that. Leaves us tying each other up as if individuals are the ones who are sick and not a system that calls it normal. As we marked Juneteenth last week, the long-delayed freedom of those in Galveston, Texas, and the last of enslaved Black folks to be told that slavery had been abolished. We also hold true that we are still living in what writer and professor Sadiya Hartman calls the afterlife of slavery, what Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. Empire demands hierarchy, that some are on top and some are down below so that we can all be exploited. This is why all of our movements must be intersectional. We can't talk about cis gay folks during Pride Month. That's me, and erase Black and Indigenous folks, trans and non-binary people of color. We can't talk about raids on gay clubs in the 60s and not talk about ICE raids today. We can't talk about tanks rolling through the streets of DC and not talk about US bombs being dropped on Palestinians and Iranians. There is no end to what empire will consume. No end to what empire will try and subsume until we can't remember what we even used to be called. People of God, how will your faith sustain you? Not a faith that says it'll all get better. Not a faith that promises easy roads ahead, but a faith that we can carry with us as our friend, our comrade, our accompanier. A faith that remembers our names when the world tries to strip them away. A faith that invites us to carry Jesus' love in our hearts and the Spirit's breath in our lungs and God's vision for the kingdom as our compass. A faith that keeps showing up, that keeps dreaming, that keeps insisting on the truth that the empire is not all there is. Today in Issaquah, we are going to embody that faith on a street corner. An act of defiance to the harm that seems far too normal. We'll dance, we'll pass out flags, we'll blow bubbles, we'll play at the water table, because Legion didn't get to have a party. But we can change the narrative. We can choose joy as resistance. We can gather as if freedom is real because our faith tells us that it already is. We can be the people that we have been waiting for because empire will never, ever have the final word. And for that, we say thanks be to God.